I decided to leave work early that Friday. Had this idea to surprise my wife and our daughter with takeout from their favorite place. Maybe catch a movie later, just simple family time. I pulled into our driveway around 3 in the afternoon. And that's when I noticed something was off. Too many cars, my wife's sedan, obviously. But there was also Julian's black truck, my former business partner. We hadn't spoken in months, not since our partnership dissolved. And then 2 other cars I didn't recognize. Walking through the front door, I heard voices coming from our living room. Not the usual afternoon quiet I expected, not my daughter's cartoons or her laughing at something silly. These were adult voices, low and serious. I rounded the corner and stopped dead in my tracks. There was my wife, sitting at our dining table like she owned the world. Julian sat beside her, closer than any former business associate should be. Across from them were 2 people in suits I'd never seen before. Obviously lawyers based on the briefcases and papers spread everywhere. And filling up the rest of our living room were my wife's parents, her sister Haley, and her brother Finn. Our daughter sat on the couch, tears streaming down her face. She looked up at me with this mixture of relief and fear that made my chest tighten. "Oh, perfect timing," my wife said, not even looking surprised to see me. Her voice was cold, mechanical, rehearsed. "We've been waiting for you." I glanced around the room. Everyone was staring at me except our daughter, who kept wiping her eyes with her sleeve. The lawyers had their hands folded, all business. My wife's family looked uncomfortable but determined. "Waiting for me?" I asked, setting my keys on the counter. "For what exactly?" Julian finally looked at me but couldn't hold eye contact. The guy who used to joke around with me every day at work now seemed like he'd rather be anywhere else. One of the lawyers, a woman with short gray hair, cleared her throat. "Mr. Anderson, I'm Attorney Bailey from Morrison and Associates. We represent your wife in these divorce proceedings." Divorce proceedings. The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. My wife leaned forward, sliding a stack of papers across the table toward where I stood. "Sign these," she said flatly. "You're giving me the company. Full ownership transfer. Julian and I will be running it together." I looked down at the papers, then back at her face. She wasn't even pretending to be upset about ending our marriage. This was business. Cold, calculated business. "The company," I repeated slowly. "The one we built together." "The one you've been running into the ground," she shot back. "Julian's been telling me about your terrible decisions, how you've been sabotaging deals." I glanced at Julian. Still couldn't look me in the eye. Our daughter sniffled louder from the couch, and it took everything in me not to go to her right then. "And if I don't sign?" I asked. The male lawyer spoke up, his voice flat and businesslike. "Then this becomes a very long, very expensive court battle that will drain whatever value the company has left. Your daughter's college fund, your retirement savings. All of it gone on legal fees." My wife's father nodded grimly. "Just sign the papers, son. It's better this way." I walked over to the table, picked up the pen they'd left there for me. The room went completely silent, except for my daughter's quiet crying. I could feel every eye on me, watching, waiting. "This gives her everything?" I asked the lawyers. "Full ownership transfer of Anderson Solutions LLC," the female attorney confirmed. "Your wife becomes sole proprietor, effective immediately upon signing." I looked at my wife one more time. She was already smiling slightly, like she'd won some game I didn't know we were playing. Julian was checking his phone, probably calculating how much money they thought they were about to control. "All right," I said, and signed my name on every line they showed me. The moment I finished, my wife's smile grew wider. Finally, some common sense. But I was smiling too now, which seemed to make Julian nervous. "Something funny?" he asked. I set the pen down carefully and looked around the room at all these people who thought they just pulled off the perfect scheme. "Not funny exactly," I said. "Just interesting timing." That's when Julian's phone started ringing. He looked at the screen, frowned, then answered. "Hello? Yeah, this is Julian Morrison." His voice was confident at first, probably expecting some routine business call. But then his expression changed. The color started draining from his face as whoever was on the other end kept talking. "What do you mean sold?" he said, his voice getting higher. "When? To who?" The whole room was watching him now. My wife looked confused, then annoyed. "Answer them properly," she hissed at him. Julian held up one finger, still listening to the phone. His face was going from pale to completely white. "This morning?" he practically squeaked. "The entire company? For how much?" I leaned against our kitchen counter, watching this unfold like a movie I'd already seen. The lawyers were exchanging glances. My wife's family looked like they were watching a tennis match, heads turning between Julian and me. 10 million. Julian's voice cracked on the last word. My wife shot up from her chair. 10 million what? Julian slowly lowered the phone, staring at me like I'd just risen from the dead. His hands were actually shaking. "That was Graham from Meridian Industries," he said quietly. "They just took ownership of Anderson Solutions. Bought it this morning for $10 million. The room exploded. "That's impossible," my wife shouted. "He just signed the papers. I own the company now." The female lawyer was frantically shuffling through the documents. "These ownership transfer papers are dated today. But if the sale happened this morning..." "The sale happened at 8 a.m., I said calmly. "About 7 hours before you all decided to have your little meeting here." Julian was still staring at me in complete shock. "You sold our company? You actually sold it." "My company," I corrected. "I was still the sole owner this morning when I signed the sale agreement. You stopped being my partner 3 months ago, remember? When you decided my wife was more interesting than our business partnership." My wife's face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, anger, disbelief, then something close to panic. "You can't do this," she said. "We had a plan. Julian said the company was worth at least 15 million. We were going to expand, hire more people." "Julian said a lot of things," I replied. "But Julian doesn't actually know what the company's worth because Julian hasn't been involved in the actual operations for months. He's been too busy planning this little ambush with you." The male lawyer cleared his throat. "Sir, if you sold the company this morning, then these ownership transfer documents are worthless." "Exactly," I finished. "You can't transfer ownership of something that doesn't exist anymore. At least, not under my name." My wife's sister, Haley, spoke up from the couch. "Wait, so there's no company to take over?" "Oh, there's a company," I said. "It's just owned by Meridian Industries now. They bought all assets, client contracts, intellectual property, everything. Clean slate." Julian finally found his voice again. "The employees. What happens to our people?" "Meridian offered positions to anyone who wanted to stay. Most of them said yes. Funny thing about loyalty, it tends to follow the person who actually signs the paychecks." My wife was pacing now, her hands running through her hair. "This is insane. You're destroying everything we built." I looked at her straight on for the first time since I'd signed those papers. No, I said. I'm protecting what I built from people who wanted to steal it. The lawyers were packing up their briefcases, clearly recognizing that their services were no longer needed. My wife's family was starting to whisper among themselves, probably realizing they'd backed the wrong horse. But Julian was still staring at me with this expression of complete horror. You planned this, he said slowly. You knew we were going to do this today. I shrugged. I had a pretty good idea. You two aren't exactly subtle. How long? My wife demanded. How long have you known? I looked at our daughter, who had stopped crying and was now watching everything with wide eyes. She needed to hear this, even if it hurt. About 3 months, I said. Right around the time Julian here started working late every Tuesday and Thursday, same days you started your new book club that never seemed to involve any actual books. 3 months earlier, I'd been working late at the office when I realized I'd forgotten my laptop charger at home. Drove back around 9 p.m. to grab it. Found Julian's truck in my driveway. I parked down the street and walked back. Through our living room window, I could see them on my couch. My business partner and my wife. No mistaking what was happening. I didn't storm in, didn't yell or throw punches. I stood there for exactly 2 minutes watching my life implode, then walked back to my car and drove to the office. Spent that entire night going through our business records. Julian had been sloppy. Copies of client files on his personal laptop, forwarding company emails to his personal account, meeting with competitors during work hours and claiming they were vendor meetings. By morning, I knew exactly what they were planning. Take over the company, cut me out, probably claim I was an incompetent partner who needed to be removed for the good of the business. So I called my actual lawyer, not the divorce attorneys they'd brought today, but Connor Welsh, who'd handled our business formation years ago. Connor, hypothetically speaking, what would happen if I wanted to sell the company? Well, as sole proprietor, you have every right to sell. Is Julian buying you out? Not exactly. I spent the next week documenting everything. Julian's unauthorized access to confidential files, his meetings with competitors, the way he'd been slowly alienating our best clients, probably softening them up for when he and my wife took over. Then I reached out to Meridian Industries. They'd been trying to acquire smaller firms like ours for 2 years. Their offer was immediate and generous. $10 million for everything, with a 6-month consulting contract for me if I wanted it. But I told them I needed 3 months to clean up some partnership issues. During those 3 months, I watched my wife and Julian get careless. They'd have their little meetings at coffee shops, thinking they were being discreet. Julian would stay late at the office, copying more files he shouldn't have access to. My wife started talking about redecorating the house, bigger budget, better furniture, planning for the windfall she thought was coming. I played along, acted stressed about work, complained about Julian being unreliable. Let her comfort me while she was planning to stab me in the back. The hardest part was protecting our daughter. She knew something was wrong between her mom and me, but I couldn't tell her the truth, not yet. 2 weeks ago, Julian made his final mistake. He tried to access our main client database over the weekend, probably wanted to copy everything before their big takeover. But I'd been monitoring his access since day one. The moment he logged in, I had him. Monday morning, I called Connor again. I'm ready to sell. Can we close this week? That's fast. What about Julian? Julian's no longer a factor. Connor handled everything. Meridian was thrilled to close quickly. By Friday morning, this week, all the paperwork was signed. $10 million, minus taxes and Connor's fees, sitting in a business account that only I controlled. Standing in my living room now, watching Julian realize he'd lost everything. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. "You've been planning this for 3 months?" my wife said, her voice barely a whisper. "Actually, you've been planning it for 3 months," I replied. I just made sure I was 2 steps ahead. Julian was looking at his phone again, probably seeing more calls he didn't want to answer. "Our clients are going to flip. They trusted us." "They trusted me," I corrected. "And I made sure Meridian will take good care of them. Better than you two would have." My wife's mother spoke up from her spot near the window. "Honey, maybe we should go. This doesn't seem like something we should be involved in." Smart woman. Wish her daughter had inherited that common sense. But my wife wasn't backing down. "This isn't over. I'll contest the sale. There has to be something illegal about selling a company right before a divorce." The female lawyer, who'd been quietly observing this whole disaster, shook her head. "Ma'am, if he was the sole owner and the sale happened before any divorce proceedings were filed, there's nothing to contest. It was his property to sell." "What about those papers I just signed?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Meaningless," the male lawyer confirmed. "You can't transfer ownership of an asset you no longer possess." Julian finally looked up from his phone. "The clients are calling. They want to know what's happening to their projects." "Tell them to call Meridian," I said. "They're in good hands." I paused. "And tell them the truth, that their former account manager tried to steal the company and failed." The room was getting quieter now. My wife's family was clearly uncomfortable and wanted to leave. The lawyers were packing up their useless paperwork. Julian looked like he might be sick. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more thing they needed to know. I walked over to where our daughter was sitting on the couch. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes that reminded me why I'd done all this. "Sweetheart, why don't you go to your room and play for a while? The grown-ups need to finish talking." She nodded and headed upstairs, but I could tell she was listening from the top of the steps. Smart kid. She got that from me. Once she was gone, I turned back to the room full of people who thought they'd just witnessed their payday disappear. "Now that she's out of earshot," I said, "let's talk about the money." My wife perked up immediately. "The 10 million, half of that is mine. Community property." I almost laughed. "You think I'm just going to hand you $5 million after what you tried to pull here?" Julian was fidgeting with his phone. "Look, maybe we can work something out. Split the proceeds. Everybody goes their separate way." "Julian," I said, "you're not entitled to anything. You stopped being my business partner the day you started sleeping with my wife. Remember that partnership dissolution you signed 3 months ago?" His face went red. "That was supposed to be temporary, until we could restructure the business." "No, that was permanent, because I knew exactly what you two were planning." I pulled out my phone and showed them a folder marked Evidence. 3 months of documented fraud, Julian. Unauthorized access to client files, copying confidential information to personal devices, meeting with competitors while claiming vendor meetings. The color drained from his face again. "And you," I said, turning to my wife. "Did you actually think I wouldn't notice you pumping me for information about our biggest clients? Asking about contract values, renewal dates, profit margins?" My wife's sister, Haley, was shaking her head. "I told you this was a bad idea. I told you to just ask for a divorce like a normal person." "Shut up, Haley," my wife snapped. "This is none of your business." "Actually, it became my business when you asked me to be here as a witness to your brilliant plan." Haley shot back. I could see the family starting to turn on each other. Perfect. Here's what's going to happen, I said, enjoying the attention. The 10 million is already secured in an account that only I control. But I'm not completely heartless. My wife's eyes lit up with hope. Our daughter's college fund gets 2 million, locked away until she turns 18. I've already had Connor set up the trust. What about me? My wife demanded. You get exactly what you brought into this marriage, which, if I remember correctly, was about $15,000 in student debt and a 10-year-old Honda. That's not fair. I helped build that company. No, you helped destroy my trust. There's a difference. Julian was looking at his phone again, probably calculating his losses. This is going to bankrupt me. I invested everything in the expansion plans. What expansion plans? I asked. The ones where you were going to use my client relationships to start a competing firm? His silence was answer enough. My wife's father finally spoke up. Look, son, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Can we sit down and work this out like adults? We could have, I said. 3 months ago when your daughter decided to commit adultery with my business partner, instead of just asking for a divorce. But that ship has sailed. My wife was getting desperate now. What if we don't contest the sale? What if we just walk away quietly? I pretended to consider it. That's interesting, because I was just thinking about how many people in our industry would be fascinated to know that Julian Morrison likes to steal client files and sleep with his partner's wife. Julian's head snapped up. You wouldn't. Try me. The male lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss a more reasonable settlement, something that avoids any public disclosure. Oh, there's going to be plenty of public disclosure, I said. Julian's going to have some explaining to do to the state licensing board. Unauthorized access to confidential client information is a pretty serious ethics violation. You can't prove that, Julian said, but his voice lacked conviction. I pulled up another folder on my phone. Server logs don't lie, Julian. Every time you accessed files you shouldn't have, every unauthorized download, every email you forwarded to your personal account. 3 months of documented violations. My wife was looking back and forth between Julian and me like she was watching a car accident. This was supposed to be simple, she said. You were supposed to just sign the papers and we'd run the company together. Simple, I repeated. Like having an affair was simple. Like lying to me for 3 months was simple. I looked around the room at all these people who'd thought they were so clever. Let me explain what's actually simple. Julian's about to lose his professional license. You're about to be a divorced single mother with no income. And I'm about to start my 6-month consulting contract with Meridian at $200,000. The room went completely silent. Plus, I added, I kept the house. Julian's phone started buzzing again. This time, he just stared at it, not answering. Probably the state licensing board, I said casually. I filed my complaint this morning, right after I finalized the sale. Figured they'd want to know about their licensed professional accessing confidential client data for personal gain. You filed a complaint? Julian's voice was barely a whisper. Complete with server logs, email records, and security camera footage from our office building. Amazing what you can see when someone's copying files at 11 p.m. on a Sunday night. My wife's family was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Her mother kept checking her watch like she had somewhere urgent to be. Her father was studying his shoes with intense concentration. This is insane, my wife said. You're destroying Julian's career over a business dispute. I'm protecting my client's confidential information, I corrected. Which, by the way, Julian violated about 47 times over the past 3 months. Each violation carries a potential fine of $10,000. The math hit Julian like a truck. $470,000 in fines, plus legal fees, plus the cost of defending against criminal charges if the district attorney decides unauthorized access to confidential business information counts as corporate espionage. Julian sank into one of our dining room chairs. Corporate espionage. You copied client financial records, contract terms, and proprietary business processes to your personal devices. Then you plan to use that information to compete against your former company. What would you call it? The female lawyer was frantically taking notes. Sir, perhaps we could discuss a resolution that doesn't involve criminal charges. Sure, I said. Julian can surrender his business license voluntarily, agree to never work in our industry again, and sign a confession detailing exactly what he did. In exchange, I won't pursue criminal charges. That's career suicide, Julian protested. No, sleeping with your business partner's wife was career suicide. This is just the paperwork. My wife was pacing again, her heels clicking against our hardwood floor. What about me? What am I supposed to do? Get a job, I suggested. Learn a skill. Contribute something to society besides drama and betrayal. I have a college degree in art history from 15 years ago. Good luck with that. Finn, my wife's brother, finally spoke up. Look, maybe everyone should just calm down and think about this rationally. I turned to him. Finn, right? The one who's been unemployed for 2 years and living in his parents' basement? His face went red. That's not relevant. It's completely relevant. Your sister asked you to be here because she thought she was about to inherit a multi-million-dollar company. Now that the money's gone, how long do you think it'll take before she asks you to move out? Haley was shaking her head. I tried to warn her. I said this whole plan was stupid and dangerous. Finally, someone with sense, I said. Haley, you work at the hospital, right? Nursing? She nodded cautiously. Then you understand the importance of ethics, of not betraying the trust people place in you. I do. Maybe you can explain that concept to your sister sometime. My wife whirled around to face Haley. Don't you dare take his side. I'm not taking anyone's side, Haley replied. But he's right. You asked us all to come here and watch you steal his company. That was wrong. My wife's parents were whispering to each other by the window. Her father walked over to me. Son, I want to apologize. We didn't know about the affair. We thought this was just a business dispute between you and Julian. Did you? I asked. Because your daughter told you I was running the company into the ground. That Julian was the responsible one who needed to take over. Did you ever think to ask for my side of the story? He looked ashamed. We trusted her judgment. Bad choice. My wife's mother joined the conversation. We had no idea she was having an affair. If we'd known. You'd have stayed home and let her destroy her marriage in private? We'd have told her to get counseling, to try to work things out. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Mrs. Richardson, your daughter spent 3 months planning to steal my life's work. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a marriage that needed counseling. This was calculated theft. Julian was still staring at his phone, which kept buzzing with calls he wouldn't answer. My other clients are going to drop me once word gets out about the licensing investigation. Probably, I agreed. Professional reputation is funny that way. Takes years to build, seconds to destroy. You're enjoying this, my wife accused. Actually, I am. 3 months ago, you two thought you were so clever, so much smarter than the boring husband who actually worked for a living. Now look at you." I gestured around the room. "Your accomplice is about to lose his career. Your family realizes you're a liar and a thief. And you're about to discover what life looks like when you actually have to support yourself." The male lawyer was packing up his briefcase. "I think our services are no longer needed here." "Probably not," I agreed. "Unless Julian wants representation for his licensing hearing." Julian looked up sharply. "When is the hearing?" "They'll contact you. Usually takes about 60 days to investigate. Then a formal hearing where you get to explain why you thought stealing client files was a good idea." "I didn't steal anything." I pulled out a printed email from my pocket. "This is a message you sent to my wife 6 weeks ago. Quote, 'Got the Morrison Industries contract details. They're paying us 40% more than their last vendor. Easy to undercut when we start our new firm.' End quote." Julian's face went white again. "Morrison Industries is one of our biggest clients. Their contract terms are confidential. You access that information without authorization and plan to use it against them. That's textbook corporate espionage." "He sent me business information," my wife protested. "That's not illegal. It is when the business information belongs to someone else's company and you're planning to use it to compete against that company." I looked at both of them. "You two aren't just adulterers. You're criminals. And I have 3 months of evidence to prove it." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Julian's phone buzzing with another call he wouldn't answer. "So, here's how this ends," I said. "The divorce papers get filed on Monday. Julian surrenders his license or faces criminal charges. And you," I pointed at my wife, "get to explain to our daughter why mommy doesn't live here anymore." 6 months later, I was sitting in my new home office reviewing contracts for Meridian Industries. The consulting work was challenging and paid exceptionally well. My daughter was upstairs doing homework, happy and adjusted to our new routine. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a familiar car in my driveway. Haley stood on my porch looking nervous. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," she said when I opened the door. "I wanted to talk to you about something." "Come in. Want some coffee?" We sat in my kitchen, the same one where this whole mess had started 6 months ago. Haley looked around, noting the changes I'd made. Fresh paint, new furniture, family photos that only included my daughter and me. "How's she doing?" Haley asked, nodding toward the stairs. "Better than I expected. Kids are resilient. She's in counseling, which helps. And she likes not having to listen to arguments every night." Haley nodded. "I wanted you to know that Julian's hearing was last week." "I heard. Lost his license permanently, right?" "Yes. And he's facing criminal charges. The district attorney decided to pursue the corporate espionage case." I sipped my coffee. "What about the rest of your family?" "My parents cut off contact with her 3 months ago, after they found out about the extent of the planning, the lies she told them about you. They were disgusted. And you?" "I tried to help her for a while. Let her stay at my place, helped her look for jobs. But she kept blaming everyone else. You, Julian, our parents, even me for not supporting her vision." I wasn't surprised. "She's working at a retail store now, part-time, living in a studio apartment across town. Julian moved back to his hometown, but nobody there will hire him either. Word travels fast in business circles." "What about Finn?" Haley almost smiled. "Finn got a wake-up call. Seeing how badly his sister screwed up her life motivated him to finally get his act together. He's working construction now, saving money to get his own place. Good for him." We sat quietly for a moment. Then Haley leaned forward. "I need to ask you something." The money from the sale. I know you put $2 million aside for college. What about the rest? Invested most of it. Conservative portfolio, steady growth. My daughter will never want for anything. And the house, paid off. No mortgage, no debt. Everything clean and simple. Haley nodded. She keeps asking our family for money. Says you ruined her life, and we should help her get back on her feet. What do you tell her? That she ruined her own life. That actions have consequences. That being married to a successful man doesn't entitle you to steal his life's work. I stood up to refill our coffee cups. You know what the funny thing is? If she'd just asked for a divorce like a normal person, she probably would have gotten half of everything. Community property laws, shared assets, the whole thing. But instead, she got greedy. She got stupid. There's a difference. My daughter's footsteps echoed from upstairs. She was probably finished with her homework, getting ready to come down for dinner. I should go, Haley said. But I wanted you to know that not everyone in my family supported what she did. And I wanted to thank you for how you've handled everything with your daughter. She's the only thing that matters now. You could have made this ugly. Custody battles, public accusations, dragging a child through the mud. Instead, you kept her protected. She didn't choose to have a mother who's a thief and an adulterer. Why should she suffer for that? Haley stood up, gathering her purse. For what it's worth, I think you handled this perfectly. My sister and Julian thought they were playing chess. But you were playing an entirely different game. After she left, my daughter came downstairs. 8 years old, smart as a whip, and thankfully taking after her father in the common sense department. Who was that, Dad? Your Aunt Haley. She wanted to see how we're doing. Are we doing good? I looked around our comfortable home, thought about the secure future I'd built for both of us, considered the peace that came from cutting toxic people out of our lives. Yeah, kiddo, we're doing great. Dad? Yeah? I'm glad it's just us now. It's quieter. I ruffled her hair. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Later that evening, after my daughter was in bed, I sat in my office reviewing the final paperwork from the divorce settlement. Everything was official now. The house was mine. The money was secure. My daughter's future was protected. Julian had been sentenced to 2 years probation and ordered to pay restitution to the clients whose information he'd stolen. His career in business consulting was over permanently. My ex-wife had signed away any claim to custody in exchange for avoiding criminal charges as an accomplice. She'd get supervised visitation twice a month, assuming she could prove she had stable housing and employment. The consulting contract with Meridian had turned into a full-time position with equity options. I was making more money now than I ever had with my own company, with none of the stress of running a business. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living well while the people who tried to hurt you face the natural consequences of their choices. I closed the laptop and headed upstairs to check on my daughter one more time before bed. She was sleeping peacefully, her room filled with the trophies and artwork that showed how much she'd grown in the past 6 months. Tomorrow was Saturday. We planned to visit the zoo, maybe catch a movie afterward. Simple pleasures with the one person in the world who actually mattered. 6 months ago, I thought my life was falling apart. Turned out it was just getting started. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.